My last video was about, it was called The Paradox of Populism. And I wanted to approach it from a sort of a systems level. And I gave an example of a party in South Africa. Now, I know that it's very clear the people behind that. But I didn't want to dwell on the people behind it because investigative journalists and judges who know much more than me are already concentrating on them. What I was more concerned about, how is it when we know so much about the people that are causing these problems, it still goes on? Is there something in the system itself which makes it easier or even possible for these bad things to happen and is somehow protecting them? So I wanted to look at populism from a sort of systems point of view. Now, the interesting thing about that thing was I had so many comments, many more than usual. And a lot of the comments were very helpful. And they made me realize I wanted to redo this, take into account some of those other comments, because they were very helpful and I was very glad of them. But there were also comments from people who, the moment I began to turn away from, I didn't start listing the bad people behind all that, immediately assumed I was trying to say there aren't any bad people, we're all wonderful, and that was not the purpose at all. So I'm going to begin with an analogy of what I was trying to do. If we take the example of the internet began and people saw huge potential in the internet for uniting people around the world, creating communities. And there were examples like the Arab Spring, where the voice of the people became very powerful through the internet. But in the last 5 years or so, we also become very aware how the internet is shattering society. It's contributing to people hating each other, dividing up into, it could lead to civil war, the internet. And the question is, why has this happened? And it's very natural to think of the people who are most strongly running the internet, the people who invented Twitter, the people who, like the creators of Facebook, and say they're evil people, they've done something to ruin us. And again, I leave that to the investigative journalists, people like that with more knowledge than me. But what really interested me was the more recent discovery of the importance of the basic algorithms that are used. Now, these algorithms weren't specifically designed in order to make people hate each other. They were designed to make money, like so many things in our world. They make money by attracting advertising, putting bums on seats in this sort of cinema term. And yet those algorithms, as been pointed out, have had a fracturing effect on society. So in other words, you could have been concentrating, putting all your energy into trying to find the people behind this evil thing, and overlooking the fact there's something in the system itself that is causing as much trouble. And that's what I wanted to do with populism. And I gave an example of my approach to conspiracy theories, or conspiracies in general. And it was the thing of iatrogenic medicine, the way that actually when you look at the figures of how much sickness, illness, public ill health is actually caused by the remedies, the medicines, and the treatments which are given to us to cure our health. And I said that, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't met or seen clear evidence of people deliberately trying to make the population ill. And yet, it happens. And I described in terms of a sort of, like the prevailing wind, that for all what people are trying to do, there's something in the commercial system which pushes towards medicines which cause side effects. And the example I gave, I said, consider three companies, designing a medicine for arthritis. One company gets a brilliant medicine that works perfectly in the laboratory and gets brilliant results, but when you take it out into the field, it doesn't work very well under normal circumstances. Another creates a medicine which actually, if you take it for long enough, several months, cures arthritis. No more arthritis. Brilliant. Another one produces a medicine which, after a few weeks, you definitely begin to notice it's doing something, it's improving. But what you don't notice is that some people get side effects. Headaches, skin rashes, stomach upsets. Now, I said, which of those three companies would win in the sense of, would become the powerful dominant ones? And I said it would be the third one. Because you see, obviously the one which produces a brilliant medicine which works very well in the laboratory but then doesn't work would start off very well because everyone's heard about these amazing results. But the very fact that everyone's talking about it, when they begin to notice that it doesn't work very well in real life, it slumps its sales. The company, the strange one, is the company who found a cure, a proper cure. Why? Of course, it would begin to sales would begin to go up and up and up when people realize this is a real cure for arthritis. But I said there's a paradox in the system, which is a patient cured is a customer lost. You see, once my arthritis is gone, I wouldn't go on with that medicine. It's been cured. I'm better. And the company, on the other hand, that produces something which definitely helps. You notice a difference. But there's an increasing population of people taking it who are beginning to suffer stomach aches, skin rashes, headaches, whatever. But the company makes remedies for those. It also makes headache pills. It also makes skin cream, things like that. That means that as it sells its medicine, it is also selling a lot of others. And that builds up. Now, when I describe it as like a prevailing wind pushing that way, you see, that company will soon be making more money than the other ones. And so it has more money to put into further research. It has more money to put into better marketing. And so that is the company I would say investors would go for because it's on the up and up and up. Now, I pointed out this isn't really a realistic proof because no company exists on just one medicine. Every company has got a portfolio of medicines. But I was just trying to show that sort of prevailing wind through the health sector, a wind which is pushing towards the advantage of never actually curing something, just helping with it and creating other problems. And I wanted to apply that thinking to the question of populism, because I gave the example in South Africa of a populist party. Well, actually, it's a populist wing of a party, which is called the RET, the RET movement. The ANC, which is the ruling party, is actually split down the middle. And it's a neck and neck sort of challenge between them. Which one is going to come out on top? And one half of it, the RET part, is a populist party. It's saying the people who support us are the poor, the out of work, the uneducated, people without jobs, living below the breadline. Whereas the other half, which is Ramaphosa's part, is for rich people, white people, people who've been to college, people who've got jobs, mostly people living in cities. And there is some truth in terms of the two lots of people who are voting for those two parties. And so the RET movement says, We are supporting those poor people. We are the ones who are caring for them. We're the ones who want them to be educated, well off, and things like that. And I pointed out that the actual results they get are appalling. For 10 years, those RET people, since Zuma was elected president, have been in power, and in that time, poverty has spread. People out of work, the out of work figures have just gone up and up and up and up and up. Unemployment figures have gone up. Education has deteriorated terribly in South Africa. Out of 144 countries whose education was compared, we're now down to number 140, 4 from the bottom. And in the case of maths and science, we're actually 144. We're 1 from the bottom. That's an appalling record for a party that claims it is going to help the unemployed, the uneducated, and so on and so forth. And what I pointed out is that the equivalent of the paradox of the healthcare, which is a patient cured, is a customer lost. The equivalent of a populist party is that if you depend on the votes, if the party depends on the votes of poor people who are poor, uneducated, unemployed, then to reduce unemployment, to educate people, and to create work is suicide, because it means there are less people who are in your voting constituency. So the best thing a populist party could do is to say it's going to help all these people, but actually increase unemployment, increase poverty, have more people out of work, and less educated. Now, that seems such an extraordinary thing. That you say, yeah, but the people in this party they aren't monsters. They're intelligent people. They're trying to do something. I think many of them really believe in the populist notion of how could we help these downtrodden people. So I tried to find an example, like my example of the 3 companies, to show how the wind in a populist party blows towards greater poverty and, the sort of troubles we're having in South Africa. And what I did is, like the other example, I considered a thought experiment of 2 areas somewhere in the country, far away from headquarters, both of which are run by ANC governments, local governments. Now, I know from my past experience and the people I've met that the ANC was created by people who are very high-minded. They're educated, because even if it's self-educated on, Robben Island, they actually studied and they educated themselves. And so the people who founded it were basically very well-meaning and intelligent, people like Nelson Mandela. But what happened in 1995 is they came to power. Now, however well-meaning a party is, once it comes to power, that power becomes attractive to other people. So people would join it, saying all the right things, but actually what they're attracted to was the power, rather than necessarily a desire to do right. So there's a lot of people in the party now, about 50%, who actually are really in it for the power and the influence they can get. So I said, imagine you've got these 2 regions, both ruled by ANC, by government people, and one of them is made up of people of the old type who are intelligent, they want to help, they want to increase education, they want all those things. The other is made up of people who are just in it for the money and all that. Now, both of those things by central government are given money towards health, education, employment, improving the infrastructure, all those things. Now, in the first region, those intelligence people use the money for those purposes. They will spend the education money on improving schools and getting textbooks, things like that. They'll spend the infrastructure money on repairing the roads, improving communications, improving bus services, all that sort of thing, and so on. Whereas in the other part, the money that should be spent on education is spent on buying fast cars, building grand houses, and so on. So that what happens to the second group is that they basically are left unchanged or slightly even worse off, because they're not being educated anymore, they're just as ignorant, there's no more work, they're just as unemployed, they're just as poor. Whereas in the other case, people are rather better educated, they're a bit better off. Business is beginning to pick up over a few years. And then I say, what happens at the next election? Now you see, those people who've been educated a bit more, they can read newspapers. They can look at the internet and find out what's going on in the country, in the world. And they can make choices. Now you see, if you give people a choice, the danger is that they might take a choice. And some of them, not all of them, but some of them will say, well, there are other parties I could vote for. I've learnt about them. This one sounds interesting. I'm going to vote for that one. So the vote dips a bit. Now, you see, cynics will say, oh, it's become bourgeois, all they're thinking of themselves. But it's not as elaborate as that. It's quite simple that if you give people choice, some of them will choose differently. And so the voting for the ANC begins to drop a bit in that area as people have more choice and they learn more possibilities. Whereas in the other area, where they're kept in total ignorance and poverty, not only do they not know there's other choices or other parties, the ANC can go in there and buy their vote with a T-shirt and a can of beans. They're so broke. And so, after the election, people at headquarters, they look at these two areas and say, they look at the area that has actually been educating people on something and say, these people aren't much good. Look how the vote has dropped there. They've been there 4 years and they haven't increased the vote. They're obviously pretty useless. They're not good comrades. We won't elect them anywhere else. In fact, we might demote them. Whereas the other lot, hey, look, the voting has gone up. They're obviously good comrades. So we'll elect them to higher positions in government. Now, again, like that model of, the three companies making a cure, I haven't said a sort of automatic mechanism, this happens everywhere. Because just as in the three companies example, in fact, companies don't exist on one medicine, they have a whole range of them. I just wanted to show the sort of the way the wind blows and how it tends to push in that direction. And in this case, prevailing wind is that once you start getting crooks, either stupid people who don't know what they're doing or people who are just greedy and want the money, the way the voting system goes and the way it works from central office is it tends to blow the scum to the top of the surface. Scum floats up to the surface because of that, just the mechanism of voting and using that as a criterion. So what I said is that there's this paradox of populism, and it tends to blow that way. Now, I just given a South African example, and I said, no, I think this actually happens quite a lot around the world. Think of other populist parties. Well, think of the original Russian Revolution. Fantastic! It was going to save all those peasants who've been downtrodden. it had such high intentions, and it got off to a very good start. But after a short while, peasants who were looking forward to having their land back and being autonomous, their land was taken from them. It all became state property. Think of let me think of oh yes, one example I thought of is at the turn of the century, the populist movement was Bush Senior, no Bush Junior, saying, starting his war on terrorism, or no, starting the Iraq War basically against Saddam Hussein. We are going to change, we're going to put the world right, and that sort of thing. This is going to make us great, and so on and so forth. Now, the people who voted for him were the very people whose boys were going to be sent off to be killed in the war. So there was a populist party where the people who were going to suffer from it were actually the people who were voting for it. And I think something similar happened with Trump. This great thing, we're going to sort of make America great. But did America become great in those years when he was in charge? Not really. Its standing went down in the world. It became more divided. So I'm saying that it's easy to see things going wrong with populist parties, but if you don't recognize the sort of the systems and what goes wrong, you're back like the person trying to find out why the internet isn't helping, trying to find who are the bad people who are breaking this all up. Now, you see, people have identified some of those bad people, but it hasn't helped. Those bad people just fight back, and they have court cases, and they say, no, we're okay, we're innocent, that sort of thing. Because people are not looking for those underlying systems which are helping to support this decline, helping to support the failure of populism. And so really that was what I was trying to say in that thing. I wasn't trying to point out mechanisms. This isn't just, we can tweak that algorithm, then it'll all be okay. It needs a real rethink of the commercial systems behind it all. That internet algorithm wasn't made in order to create havoc, even though it was used that way by certain influencers, things like that. It wasn't made to do that. It's just a kink in that algorithmic system has caused those splits. And that's the sort of level we're wanting to work on it. That's the sort of level I was suggesting. But many people, once I started sort of turning away from focusing on who are the bad people behind it, they immediately thought I was trying to say, there aren't any bad people, it's all this is just a conspiracy theory. I wasn't particularly interested in that. I wanted a closer look at some of the evolutionary mechanisms in our society. And I said the way to think about it that I find useful is to think about this like magical thinking. To recognize that you can have a discarnate intelligence. Now the skeptic says, you can't have a discarnate intelligence because you need a brain. There must be a brain if you've got intelligence. And I was thinking, well, that's stupid really, because what is an artificial intelligence if not a discarnate intelligence? What about the intelligence in ecological systems? An ecological system is a very intelligent thing. It responds to changes, and reaches homeostasis. It manages to hold itself together, even when there are shifts in the weather, shifts in outside influences, when human beings come and impact it. It's got the intelligence to respond to that. And I'm saying that these systems, like the medical profession, or a party, or a political system, has got sort of intelligence in it. It can survive, and it can look after itself. Now, something like the medical profession survives because part of its survival is the benefit it gives to humanity. And so we all think, oh, what a wonderful thing it is, but we forget that its survival means it is surviving. And sometimes its survival can be at the expense of humanity. And I gave the example of a virus. A virus uses us to support its existence. A human body is a resource that it can infect and then it can spread. But a virus that kills everyone quickly, and here's the paradox of the virus. The paradox is that a body killed is a resource wasted. If the virus gets into the body and the person dies, then they're buried or burnt, and all the viruses in it are dead. So the optimum strategy for a virus is to become as infectious as possible and as harmless as possible. And I said, the Jesus of viruses, if you like, is the common cold, because it's so mild that many heroic people say, oh, I've got a bit of a snuffle, that's not going to stop me going to work. And so they go to work and they sneeze and the whole office gets infected. That is a successful virus, and that is the best there is. And you notice it with COVID. It came in killing quite a population of people, but with the variants, they tend to move towards being more infectious but less lethal, because the prevailing wind blowing in a virus population is in the direction of the common cold. Spread like mad and not be noticed, or is the ideal for them. And so I'm looking for those sort of how the wind blows, and saying, I'm not saying don't stop looking for who are the conspirators, who are the bad people using this system, whatever. Also look for the mechanism, the underlying mechanisms, the prevailing winds, and seeing if we can do something about that. So anyway, that's I'm going to stop there. And if you want to know more, look back at the original video or the earlier ones I mentioned.